Hello and good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. And this evening I'm delighted to be joined by Nikki,
Hi.
otherwise known as V Peacock, on her books. So Nikki's book, The 13th Girl, came out on the 1st of Feb. We're just saying that you might see it the right way around, you might not. But you might get a chance of one did and one didn't. So thank you, Nikki, for joining us. It's a pleasure to speak to you about your book.
Yes, be here.
And would you like to tell us in your own words about it?
Sure. So The 13th Girl is my third thriller, and it's all about protagonist Dee, who has just been released from a mental institution, a mental health care facility, and she's just kind of finding her feet, trying to get back into the normal world. And she was a unwitting participant in a quite famous documentary many years ago, and so she wants to start her own documentary to kind of supersede that and feel like she has some control over her life. And when she hears about a serial killer in the area, she unfortunately latches onto that.
It's really that sort of the whole sort of accident that she's been through. She's basically come out the other side of it, but she's trying to sort of incorporate herself into the world again, isn't she? She's got a job, which they're not very nice to her in the job, are they really? I mean, they obviously don't know her background, but even so, they're just not very nice people. And so what inspired you to write Dee's story? Because she's a very complex character. She's had a lot going on in her past and she's got a lot going on in her present. So what sort of inspired you to write her?
I think that the main thing that kind of, I tend to write books that I want to read, and I wanted to read. Mental health goes through most thrillers. I mean, every protagonist has got some kind of mental health problem, whether that be depression or alcoholism or
Yeah.
anything. And I wanted something to be a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more variety in terms of something that does happen more often than people think, which is amygdala hijacking, but people haven't perhaps heard of. So I wanted her
No,
to
I
have
haven't.
no, and it's scary. It's
Yeah.
really scary, and it's something that can happen that is just not your fault. If you get hit in the wrong place of your brain, especially if your brain's still developing as a child, then it can do untold damages to the brain function. And we still, as a kind of collective, we don't know how the brain really works. We probably know about 20% of it. So
Yeah.
something like that happens and you can be in a lot of trouble, and it can change you as a person. And it's that kind of effects that can affect the family dynamic, then affect you as a person, and create that kind of need to have a more secure, to be in a facility that is more secure, that looks after you, and that it teaches you how to deal with the amygdala hijacking. Basically, amygdala hijacking is when the amygdala is looking after your fight or flight senses, and it gives you the wrong adrenaline rush at the wrong times, so you can have violent outbursts, or you can run away, or it's giving you the wrong signals. And that's what happens to Dee. But she learns how to control it. She's got some coping mechanisms in place,
Yeah.
so they think that now's the time to kind of let her out and see how she behaves in the real world.
But I mean, it's a really it's a tragic story in a way, because before that happened, before she has the accident, her life, she's pretty much a normal child growing up, and then that happens and basically completely alters her life, where she ends up in this documentary, sort of being, well, she's almost like a guinea pig, isn't she? I was really sort of amazed that her parents sort of let her go through that, because that's in some ways that's scarred her more, hasn't it, than the actual accident.
Yeah, I think it's, from my side, the parents just were desperate. They didn't really
Yeah.
know what was going on. They had their faith, and they had a very smooth talker. They had
Mm.
kind of antagonists, I guess, within the book, that was trying to make her name within the documentary world, saw her opportunity and just talked her way through the parents. And that was how kind of Dee ended up in this, almost like a second accident that then sent
Yeah.
her where she actually did get the help, I guess. So
Yeah, no, it was I mean, what she's sort of been through in the book, it's you almost sort of, when she decides, so then basically as the book sort of progresses, we find out that there's a serial killer, the righteous wraith, which is something you need to put your teeth in to say.
Yeah.
And she becomes fixated upon, but they, she, whoever, I don't want to give away spoilers. They are carrying out their crimes, and then they're courting the press, aren't they, with their basically, telling everybody what they've done, and in quite gory detail. And she's not afraid of things like that. I suppose what she's seen in her life, she's not scared. In fact, she becomes, she wants to make her own sort of documentary about that. And her parents and her doctors and everybody are sort of trying to drastically steer her away from it, aren't they? So but yeah, what was your sort of thinking behind that sort of fascination with her?
Oh, to me, Dee was always quite naive. I refer to her, like, with my agent and my editors, as a lovable oddball.
Yeah.
And she is, deep down, she is trying to do the best she can. And the thing with the reader, when they're it's all from her point of view.
Yeah.
So you can never really tell, because everything is filtered through her lens as to really what's going on, and how much truth she's given, and how much is something that's going on from somewhere else, or that she's assumed from something. So the people at work might not be as evil as
no, that's true. Yeah, no, I haven't actually thought about that.
Yeah.
You've almost got the D filter on, haven't you? It's like every
first person narrative. Every first person narrative, you're always filtered through the character, and sometimes that can be wonderfully comforting if that's a rom-com and it's a lovely character.
Yeah.
But in a thriller where you've got a character that really, she's trying to help, and she's trying to do her best, and she wants to, I suppose, rise above what's happened to her.
Yeah.
Quite desperate to do that, but she's still very incredibly naive. She's very childlike in the way she looks at things. And I think the reader's probably there going, oh my God, don't do that. Don't do that. What are you doing? And she's kind of, like I said, she's the lovable oddball that you want to protect. I would hope as a reader. But also, I got a review recently that said it was very uncomfortable to read. And I thought, how lovely that I actually managed that, because it's really easy to make a reader scared, and it's really easy, like in a rom-com, to make them feel love, but to make someone feel uncomfortable, slightly uncomfortable when they're reading it. And then I've done my job, I've created that character that's taking you through that world.
Yeah, I think that's really true, actually, because there are bits of it where I was thinking about the incident in the park, which I won't go into too much detail with, but where she does things, and you sort of then, if you think about it afterwards, you think about like how, because she sort of talks about like how her mum and dad react to things, but actually, if you were her parent, you would probably react the way that you do to her, what she does, because you'll be like, no, don't do that. That's really bad. And also, I imagine they're really scared that, after the fact that she's gone through so much and she's now got some sort of, normal life, that they don't want her to have to go back, into sort of care and be in that sort of environment again.
Yeah, and also they're not trained professionals. They're just parents, and nobody gets a hand when you become a parent. Your child has mental health difficulties. You're not handed oh, here you go, here's how to deal with this. You're not handed anything like that. So they're not that equipped to deal with it themselves. So you can imagine the stress and strain that's kind of piled upon them to try and keep straight and narrow.
Yeah, and there are some bits in the book where you said about uncomfortable, and I was thinking of another bit where she goes on a journey to a place, and something bad, she comes across something bad, and I'm just like, no, just go home. You don't need to be doing this. But
ring the police, go away.
Just go, because you're really. And I think she becomes sort of a person of interest, doesn't she, because of her behavior. And she seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and because she's got that background, I imagine that she's got that stigma, the sort of stigma of being in that sort of institution, and now being out, that people sort of, like you say, people think she's odd. And would she maybe do something, like, what would she do, I guess, is the question.
Yeah. I also thought it was really sad regarding sort of mental health. I mean, mental health issues are coming to light now. People are more accepting
Yeah,
of, and understanding that things can happen. But when someone actually seeks help like that, when they've had that kind of help, but it becomes a stigma rather than that they're getting better. Whereas there's
yeah,
a lot of people out there that don't seek help and they're trying to deal with
no,
it on their own. But you'll never know, you never know that person across from you on the bus what they're thinking, or what they've
no,
gone through.
not at all,
And
no.
so, the people that get help then suddenly are like, oh, well, there's something wrong with you.
Do you think, because I mean, most characters are flawed in one way or another, but is it fun to write a flawed character, where you don't really know, like you say, you don't really know what they're thinking, what, sort of whether what's coming out is the truth, or does that make it even more fun to write?
With a thriller, definitely. It
Yeah,
makes it so much easier to kind of not that I like to mislead readers, but obviously at the
yeah,
end, be a bit of a surprise as to what's going on. And I always have a surprise in my epilogue as well as having, so you need to read to the end to really understand everything.
yeah,
And I do enjoy, because I always do write first person. I have
yeah,
to have a character that I can stand behind. And Dee was hard. She was very hard work. She took me longer than most to write.
yeah.
Fallon and the brother, and even the brother himself as a serial killer, came out
Yeah.
easy. He did.
Yeah,
And
I was gonna say to you, was there
yeah.
I was gonna say, was there a character that you found difficult to write?
Oh,
Was there
definitely,
anyone?
yeah.
Yeah,
But she was worth it. It was like all good things. Something that's worth it takes a bit of effort. And I'd actually started 13th Girl after I finished Little Bones. That's how long
yeah.
it took me to do. So I wrote another book in between.
Wow. Wow, that is, yeah. Because it must have, yeah. Because I mean, I guess, when they always say you must know your characters and things, you must have really had to get, like, under her skin to sort of to make her as realistic as she comes across in the book.
It was, yeah, it's a hard job because I mean, I haven't got amygdala hijacking or anything like that,
No.
thankfully. But I do know a lot of people that work in mental health, and I did do a lot of research on it to make sure that I was getting everything correct. And it is such a sad it's such a
Mhm.
sad thing to happen because any part of the brain that can be injured, you can just wake up a different person, and your family don't know you, they've lost you. You're still you, but you
Yeah.
person. And so that's why a lot of families will walk away like they did in the book, that they don't really talk to her during the time she's in the institution because they don't know what to say to her because to her, to them, she's not their D, you know.
No. No, it's like, because when she comes out and her, her parents are sort of, they almost treat her, well, she says, doesn't she, about they treat her like a baby, and,
Mm.
she has to use the plastic cutlery, and, the food is, she sort of, she talks quite a lot about her food, doesn't she? And how
Yeah,
it's sort of,
because obviously cakes.
yeah. Yeah, she does like a cake. I wonder whether was that based on anything, that you
I
knew?
like cake.
Yeah, I do
I
too.
do. But to her, it was very much because it was part of like where she lived in St Alders. They were always a treat, and I always
Yeah.
feel like we get a lot of our kind of eating habits from the treats we were given when we were growing up. So if you
Mm,
were a good girl, you got sweets. If you had a bad day, you got sweets.
yeah,
Suddenly sweets become the thing you go to when you want to feel better, and
yeah.
that can affect how you view food. And unfortunately, that was the treat for her, was to get a cake. And so she becomes a little bit obsessed with cakes, and now she's out in the real world, she's like got them everywhere.
Cake, cake, cake everywhere. I think we're all a bit like that. Did you touched on your research, and sort of, how did that sort of come about? Did you sort of, when what came first? Did you know the story was D when you wanted to write the 13th Girl? Was it the serial killer that came first, or D that came first, or?
That's kind of like chicken and egg, I guess, because everything kind
Yeah,
of, for me, when I'm writing, I always have an idea. I have a beat sheet, so I always know vaguely where I'm going, or you can end up with a story that just goes round and round in circles that
yeah,
doesn't help anybody. I tend to have the beat sheet, so I know vaguely what's going to happen, but the character has to conform to the beat sheet, or they won't do what you want them to do.
yeah,
when you're writing, it just doesn't sound realistic. Then if you have a very stubborn character, they're not going to fall at the end by, you know, by conforming to something. So you have
Yeah.
to make the character fits your plot line. So always make sure I have the plot line first, then the character kind of comes across. But the serial killer in this one came to me quite, you know, he came fully formed. He didn't
Yeah.
really develop much. He was just one of those that just likes to court the media, wants the spotlight, you know,
Yeah.
will get it, thinks he's invincible, and unfortunately kind of is to a degree, and
Yeah.
is working the system to be able to sort that out.
Yeah, I sort of found him quite fascinating. I'm calling him, but you know, whatever, you know, who it is, because I don't want to give them, I don't want to give any clues. But yeah, I thought that that was that sort of side of it was really tense, because you knew that obviously because of the title and it says 12 girls gone, but we sort of start quite early on, don't we? I can't,
Mhm.
you know, we build up to those. So as you go through the book, the sort of head count
Yeah.
increases quite dramatically, and Dee is sort of fascinated with that side of it, and you know, she wants to sort of make her own documentary. And then we're sort of introduced to, well, we're introduced to Louisa fairly early on, aren't we? And
Mhm.
she's sort of like, I sort of felt like she was like Dee's nemesis, really, wasn't she? Dee sort of feels like that everything that happened, or well, not everything that happened to her, but basically the incident that happened with Louisa is her fault, and that's why she wants to have her own go at it, doesn't she? And so how
Yeah.
did Louisa come about? How did she sort of happen?
Well, again, it just from the plot line itself, I needed a character that would escalate things.
Yeah,
Um, I needed something in there that would pull in the religious aspect that I needed.
yeah,
And Louisa just kind of fit that bill. Someone who was out for themselves, didn't really, you know, portrayed herself as someone who was there for the good, that wanted to help,
mm,
but in fact was just looking out for number one and wanted to create her own documentary above everyone else. And she does, you know, and she makes out like a bandit with it, and you know, gets
yeah,
awards, and you know, and she leaves Dee in the dust. You know, she doesn't, yeah, after she's made herself, she doesn't care anymore.
no,
So I think that then pushed, for me, Dee needed someone like that to be able to feel like she had to compete,
yeah,
for her to
yeah.
then take the chances that she takes later on, especially when she meets Andy.
Yeah, well, because she does, you know, she does make a lot, like you said, you know, you're shouting at the book quite a lot of the way
Yeah.
through, because she just makes so many, you know, she does, like you say, that naivety of like messaging random people on Facebook and who are like, you know, maybe suspects, or you know, they're sort of deceased, you know, one of the deceased boyfriends or something. And you're just like,
Mm.
no, you wouldn't do that, would you? But she would. Um, but the other bit that I found really fascinating with her is, considering what she goes through in the documentary, is her that she's very, very she, you know, she says her prayers every night.
Mm.
She has that really sort of she get well, he's almost like her mentor, isn't he? The priest. You know, she goes
Mm.
to the him and sort of talks to him about what's going on, and I found that really interesting. Was that sort of, where did that sort of come from, the sort of her faith, and was that like because of the parents, or just because of something else?
Well, it was kind of dual purpose, really. I mean, firstly, I needed her to have some form of social circle, but of
Yeah,
course, her being in an institution, her social circle would be very limited
yeah,
in terms
yeah,
of, because people tend to go in and then come out again. So she wouldn't have like long-term friendships from the people around her, apart from Cookie, who becomes like her
yeah,
best lifer,
yeah,
kind of she sees kind of like herself, and the father Jacob, who helped save her
yeah,
in the accident that hurts her brain in the first place.
yeah,
So she clings on to these people as best she can. And the other side was with the kind of religious aspect. I wanted her to have a bit of faith, but it's also a coping mechanism for her,
yeah,
because something's working. You know, she's figured it out. She's not having the hijacks that she used to. She's becoming normal, but
yeah,
she's doing it through medication, and she's doing it through prayers, she thinks.
yeah,
So
yeah.
she's not want to rock the boat or, you know, change anyone if
No,
that's do it. And also she is kind of lonely. She's very much on her own. No one really understands her. So God becomes kind of
no,
like, that she can talk to as well and kind of catch up
Yeah.
on the day.
Yeah. Yeah, because she's very routine. I guess that's coming from the institution, isn't it,
Yeah.
as well, but, she has her sort of rituals, doesn't she? And the doctor, Dr. Taylor sort of says to her about, going to the dark retreat, pull the blinds down, and she takes her pink pill, and,
Mm.
it's all sort of, um, it's very much, I guess when you've been in an institution like that, I imagine things are very sort of regimented, and you have
Yeah.
your pills at this time of the day, you have your dinner at this time of the day, so she's used to that regime, I guess.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's really hard for people when they get out of that kind of I mean, the whole point of being in a regime like that is having that routine is in place to stop you from having to think about these things. So
Yeah.
the rest of us, we have to think about what we're going to have for breakfast, how we're going to get dressed,
Yeah.
what we're going to do stuff, what's our schedule like, what's our work life like. She doesn't have to think about that. And so she has more mental kind of bandwidth to deal with what she needs to
Mm.
deal with. And that's part of the process. But the problem is, and that's not just in those kind of institutions, it's in hospitals and it's in the army and prisons. And
Yeah.
that's so difficult for people to come out of those places without any kind of middle ground to help them, because suddenly
Yeah.
then they're bombarded with these decisions that the rest of us kind of take for granted that we make on a regular basis, but suddenly they
Yeah.
can all start piling up.
And I guess when you've got a sort of a brain injury like she has, that's always, that sort of routine and thing is actually quite important to her. It's something that she's had for, and actually it's, like you say, a coping mechanisms, and what helps her deal with the red, as she calls it.
Mm.
That's sort of, I thought it was interesting how she sort of calls those, what you called it, something, didn't you? You said like I can't remember what you said at the beginning. You said it like the episodes, but she calls it the red, doesn't she? Where
Amygdala
she's,
heights, yeah.
yeah,
She calls
yeah,
it red. She even says, like, it's cliched, but what she didn't want to do is she didn't want to anthropomorphize it and give it like a name or anything. She wanted
no,
to get a feeling or a color, because that was just easier for her to kind of understand. And I think that was part of the doctor's way of trying to treat it as well.
yeah. Yeah, when you did your research, was there anything, obviously you did a lot of research about the sort of condition, but was there anything that sort of surprised you when you were researching?
Um, not surprised me per se. It was more kind of, I mean, I knew a lot about it to begin with my kind of the people that I know that work in those areas. So I
Yeah.
have a lot of background, and it was more, it's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of documentaries out there that perhaps don't shine great lights on institutions like this, but
Mm.
there's also, I think it's one of those where, it's all down to the people working in them. So you can have some
Yeah.
really great doing some great work, but you can also
Yeah.
have some really bad people doing some really bad work. And it's not
Yeah.
down to the institution. Unfortunately, it comes down to the individuals. And you have that in every institution, whether that
Yeah.
be or, mental health or even physical health or anything along those lines. So it's more, for me, I tend to look at things as a kind of person to person basis rather than a whole. And I think
Yeah.
that's what kind of I found more intriguing from that point of view, because you can't say that something's great without looking at the people that are working in it and how
Yeah.
they're kind of adding to it.
That's really true, isn't it? Because actually it is the building that gets the sort of the stigma of being the bad place, but actually generally buildings aren't bad. It's
No.
what goes on inside the
Yeah.
buildings that is bad. And like you said, it's that sort of good and bad people. And I think with Dee, she is so trusting, that, and I imagine that, a lot of people in lots of institutions are trusting. And so for people to sort of betray that trust is makes it even more scarier, doesn't it? That that people are able to sort of infiltrate those places and be, with people who need that care and support, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of take. And like I said, I mean, you look at things like the way the Catholic Church handled some of the scandals that they had, and
Yeah.
you can't blame every priest for a couple of priests being the way they were.
No.
You can't say that the whole Catholic Church is bad because of that. And you can't say that, but the whole Catholic Church are good for it's all shades of grey, isn't it?
Yeah,
That
definitely.
that
I think you mentioned about the serial killer, the righteous wraith. I love saying that word because it's a
Yeah.
how did so you said that was quite an easy sort of thing to come up with, so we can't obviously go into too much detail about that, but did you always know how they were going to turn out?
Yes. You can't not know who it is from the start, unfortunately, because that's a massive rewrite, and I don't have
Yeah.
that time on my hands.
No.
So I
Yeah.
always kind of knew what was going to
Yeah.
happen, and I always kind of um, I had a vision for the killer, so to
Yeah.
speak, as what was going on and how it was going to happen. And what I did was I just ramped up killers that I already knew, like from true crime, you know.
Yeah.
But so the Wraith went to the nth degree of everything. He wanted to court the media. He wanted to get the spotlight. He wanted to do the
Yeah.
worst kills ever. You know, this was his kind of thing in life, and yeah, so he was quite easy to write from that point of view. I just thought, what's the worst thing I can put here? I did it.
Because you said about plotting, and so you're obviously you obviously are quite sort of strict with your plotting and your plan. You're not a pantser. You know where you're going. Does that so do you are you very rigid to that? Do you sort of, once you've done it, is that, or do you change it sometimes?
No, I do change. I'm very organic when I write. I just feel like you need a map, you know,
Yeah.
because I find that I run a writers group as well, a local writers group, and you can always tell with the kind of the writers that are coming to it fresh, they
Yeah.
think they can put, you know, pen to paper, they can put finger to typewriter and just write their story, and their story will just go round and round and round and round, have no end, and you know, and it feels like you're not hitting the markers. And I do believe in a beat sheet. I do believe in having the right storytelling
Yeah.
aspects, right places, so you pace it in the correct way. Because if you're not pacing it in the correct way, you're going to lose readers. They're going to get bored. They're going to get annoyed, and maybe they won't even realize that. They'll just feel it. It'll just be a natural feeling in them that they want to put the
Yeah.
book. And that's the one thing I'd hate to happen. I don't want people to put the book down. I want them to get to the end, as uncomfortable as it may be. I want them to get to the end, and I want them to get to the point of what's going on.
Yeah, because I was one of the questions I was going to ask you was about the pace of it, because it is fast paced, pretty much from the minute that you sort of start, you are sort of on a, and is that, it's sort of, sometimes when you're reading a fast paced book, I love a fast paced book. I get bored quite easily. So I want something that, but also you feel like, you're galloping along. Does it feel like that when you're writing it? Do you feel like it's going along, or is it not that sometimes you like it's like treading through mud?
Turgid. No, it can be difficult because it just depends on how it's going as a story. So I will go from more exciting scene to more exciting scene to get me
Yeah.
through. I think once I hit to about 50,000 words on a book, I become committed to it.
Yeah.
So I try.
Whoa, that's quite a lot. That's like halfway.
I know. If I do any less than that, I can give up. You know, I can say, "Oh, this isn't working. I'm going to try something else." And my biggest problem is that I have too many ideas. I'll be like, "Oh, but what about I can do this?" And then suddenly
Yeah.
I'm onto something else if I'm not careful. So I've learned how to kind of tailor my inspiration, I guess, to make sure that I'm still actually producing something in its entirety that
Yeah.
can be put out to market. Because nobody wants a third of an idea that I had.
So did you,
If
because,
do, I don't know.
well, you don't know. This is your third book. So Small Bones was your first one, and then it was the brother, wasn't it? Yes, the
Yeah.
second one. And then the 13th girl. Um have you sort of, these are all sort of thrillers, but do you write, do you do a writing group? So are you inspired to write anything, another genre, or?
Well, I actually started off writing youth adult,
Oh,
and
did you?
I've got a couple of novellas published with a Canadian publisher called Evernight,
Ah,
and
yeah.
that was like 12 years ago, something like that. They're quite fast paced and covered with serial killers and
Yeah.
darkness, as you would expect.
Yeah.
Um, but they're just novellas, so they are the kind of 40,000
Yeah.
edge. My first real novel was Little Bones, and then
Yeah.
the brother. So really, I have done the three. But yeah, I'd like to look back at youth adult now that I've got the kind of the wherewithal under my belt to write a full book.
Yeah.
And I've always liked the idea of a cozy crime as well, something a little bit, I don't know whether I can manage how much lighter I can do it, but stay on the humor, because I think my editors tend to kind of take out a lot of my humor because they don't like it in the book. They think it kind of distracts. So
Yeah,
the
that's interesting.
what humor you find in there is probably about a third of what I actually put in to begin with. Maybe I'll
Yeah,
get away with
because
more if
actually there are you know, it is quite a dark book, and it's, you know, but there are bits in there where Dee does things where you can't help but laugh, because, you know, they're just so, you just think, oh, good grief, girl, what you doing? But she's also quite funny, isn't she? Because of her naivety, she says things sometimes that are actually quite amusing as well.
yeah.
Um, I find that interesting, isn't it? But I guess that's sort of part of the editing process, isn't it? That, you know, the book is, the editors know what the reader wants, and I guess that would be quite interesting to sort of, you know, to go to a cozy crime. I mean, quite a lot of cozy crime aren't cozy, are they? Really, they still involve a murder. So, you
But
know, that's
that's
not.
the
It's
only thing
quite a,
you
yeah.
get away with
Yeah,
the
but
murder.
yeah, it's not normally too bloody, is it? I remember when I worked in libraries, there was a lady that used to come in for a lady that was in her 90s, and she used to like listening to audiobooks because she was blind.
Oh.
And she always used to say, well, she likes a good murder, but she doesn't like it to be too graphic. And she doesn't like swearing, and she doesn't like sex.
Oh no.
So we'd have to have this like list of authors that, you know, were crime but not too crime, you know,
Yeah,
murdery but not too murdery,
murder.
and no
Sexy, but not
rude.
that sexy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think people do have that sort of niche, don't they, of what they like, and, you know, and I imagine people who like sort of psychological thrillers like them quite dark.
Yeah, and I like psychological thrillers in that sense because I can put layers in it. You know that there is a theme in
Yeah.
the book and there's a message in the book, and you know I can play with it a little bit as well. So it's not just a kind of who done it, or it's not just all about bloody murders. There are levels in it, and you as the reader you can read whatever level you want out of it and hopefully get what you want from it.
So how hard was it to, because obviously, you know, we can't go into too much detail about the sort of, you know, the conclusion and things, but I think it's always, you always want to give the reader a chance, I guess, to sort of be able to guess who is the murderer and how they got there. And so how difficult was that, in a book which is sort of first person, to sort of weave that in as well?
Well, it's actually much easier on a first person book. I struggled more with the brother because I was also writing in his perspective to not
Right.
drop too many hints, you know, to not drop any big clangers, so to speak, as to
Yeah.
what it was. So that was much harder. Whereas with Dee, she was very easy because she doesn't really spot things. You know, you
No,
put it in, the reader could spot it, but she's not going to highlight it for you because she
no.
doesn't see.
No, no, she's very, like you say, there's a lot of things that she doesn't see. And I thought it was clever as well, because I didn't know who it was. And but you drop, there's quite a lot of red herrings, isn't there, as you go along, which, and I think she sees them in a way, doesn't she? She thinks, she suspects people to be the serial killer. And whether she's right or wrong, I'm not going to say, but you know, as it goes along, you sort of, you think, because she's quite an unreliable narrator, you don't, I was like, well, I'm not really going to believe what she thinks, because you know, she could be just sort of, yeah. But I thought that was quite, yeah, I thought I like to get to the end and not know where it's going really, and who it is. So it definitely worked for me.
Oh.
um did you, so Dr. Taylor, she's an interesting character, and we come, and I think another one of Dee's sort of social circle, really, isn't
Yeah.
she? She's her doctor, sort of psychologist, I guess you would call her, therapist.
Yeah, she's a psychiatrist because she can prescribe medication. So,
Yeah,
but someone in that position as D would have a psychiatrist looking after them to make sure that you know, someone that knows her, that has taught her those techniques to
yeah.
get acts under control and to help her kind of, I suppose, smooth her into going back into this life that she doesn't even really know.
No, because her parents are very sort of keen on her, and I guess they've probably, because they don't know, like you said, they don't know how to deal with, you know,
Mm.
really. with their daughter anymore, because she's been, you know, in this institution, she's come out, and they're sort of, I guess it's sort of, you know, wanting someone to help them steer her in the right direction.
Yeah, very much so. And also, it's from my point of view, the parents were almost like stuck when she was 12, so they
Yeah,
used to treat her like a kid
yeah, yeah,
because they haven't been parents really. You know, they visited her every now and again, and then that kind of petered off, as it tends to do, unfortunately, in these situations. And their lives then kicked in, and they you know, they were mistreated from the documentary as well, because as soon as that became famous, of course, then that
yeah,
back on them, and the questions even you've had about them, you know, well, how could they put their daughter through this and things, you know,
yeah,
going to be thinking that at the same time. So you know,
yeah. Well, I think as yeah, I think as a parent, you sort of think, well, you wouldn't do that, but then I guess with hindsight, you don't know what you would do if you were in that situation where they would, like you say, they were desperate.
yeah,
Um, I thought her dad tried to treat her more adult than the mum, but I guess that's because her mum had maybe lost her for such a long time that she wanted to sort of, you know, basically have that 12-year-old back again.
yeah.
Um,
And
where
also
where
they're mental health professionals, you know, and people forget that once someone, you know, comes back into their life, you know,
yeah,
these people are not trained to look after them, they're not trained to deal with them, they don't have the
no,
patience, you know, and it can become incredibly frustrating from their point of view if you're telling someone, do this, no, do this, no, do
yeah.
this, you know, and not
Well, that's
doing it,
frustrating. That's
realizing
kids all over.
they, you know, they're not being petulant or anything, that they're just, they
No.
can't understand what you're telling them.
Yeah. No, I yeah, I found that was did you sort of, when you were writing Dr. Taylor, was there sort of, was that based on sort of knowledge of, you know, was that sort of based on sort of people that you sort of research, or you know, when you were sort of looking at that relationship between her and Dee, was that sort of based on, you know, people that you've spoken to, or?
No, not really. She was more kind of very similar to the other characters. I needed her to be there in a certain light,
Yeah,
keep the plot going, and to be there for Dee when she needed her, and to push her in the right direction that the plot needed her to go in as well, and just to be that support side. So she just and she also, she says the kind of things, and she does the kind of things that I would hope, you know, a doctor would do, I guess,
yeah,
to a
yeah.
degree, in terms of the advice she gives and how she kind of thinks outside the box when it comes to, you know, it's not a one pill for everybody kind of
No,
theory that she has. She actually does try to get Dee out of herself.
yeah. I think that I hadn't really thought about that until you said earlier about that sort of French, you know, she doesn't really have that social circle, and these, you know, the father, I can't remember his
Jacob.
last name now. That's it, Father Jacob, and Cookie, I guess, is and she, you know, he's her friend, but he's not, you know, able to be out in the real world with her, so she has to go back to see him. But it's quite sad, really, that, you know, she doesn't have that sort of social circle are generally adults, and someone who's, you know, but I guess that's going to be very difficult for her to, you know, come out into that real world
Yeah.
and just pick up, because she's lost that for good, really, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. She's, well, for, I would hope not for good, you know,
But
looking forward for
no.
her, but she's
Yeah, well,
lost
yeah,
it for a bit, in
she
terms, I
lost
mean,
it.
she even, yeah, she even has a moment in the book where she realizes, you know, she's probably not going to end up with children. She's not going to
Yeah,
have a partner because she's just not equipped to do that. You know, she's never going to be called mummy, you know, and that's a really hard thing, I think, for anybody to realize, let alone a character in
yeah.
that position.
That was really, yeah, that was really sad. There was really some really touching moments in the book as well. I mean, I think you sort of think psychological thriller, but actually generally, like you were saying, a lot of people in a psychological thriller have got issues, whether it's, you know, like whether it's mental health or whether something's
Mm.
happened to them, you know, it's, there are sort of emotional bits of it as well, aren't there? And people who are reading it that have, you know, maybe experienced it would obviously see that side of it as well.
Yeah, and nobody wants to read books with perfect characters because there's no conflict
No,
with,
well,
there's
no,
nowhere
exactly.
to go with, you know, other than down, and nobody wants to read a complete downer book.
No. Well, and also with her is you don't know where it's going to go. You
Yeah,
know, she's so, I loved that about her. She's so like unpredictable that what, you know, that you think, oh, well, I know what she's going to do next. And then she does something completely different.
Yeah.
That must have been quite fun to write. As much as
Oh
she was
yeah.
troublesome, she was fun.
I guess that's probably one of the traits we do share. So if you said to me, go left, I'd be like, I'm going right. Just for the sake of it, just because you told me to go the other way, I'm going to go this way.
So there's a little bit of I imagine that's the same with a lot of with books, isn't it? A lot of authors will say that there's got to be some of them in the book
Mm-hmm.
because it's right. You're writing it from you, so
Yeah.
whether it's just the sort of the determination or stubbornness or whatever you want to call it. You're
Well,
like, well, that's
I,
yeah,
I deliberately give each character I write from one of my traits because that puts me closer to them in terms of how I write them. So, like
yeah,
Cherie, dark sense of humor in Little Bones, and I was
yeah,
allowed to let that go, which was great. And Alan in The Brother has my incessant need to help people, and
yeah.
and Dee has a bit of my stubbornness and a little bit of my naive. Well, I mean, I'm not as naive as her, but I can be sometimes.
And maybe your cake
Yeah, a little bit of
fascination
cake
as well.
obsession.
um, Nikki, what are you working on at the moment? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I'm working on another thriller. I am working on a cozy as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
exciting.
and a youth adult. I'm doing a lot.
Wow,
Especially
you are.
too thin. But yeah, so I'm nearly finished on the next thriller. That's going to
Yeah.
my agent in the next couple of weeks. And I'm really excited about that one because it's a little bit different. All my books are a little bit different from each other. I know that a lot of authors tend to find a formula that readers like and they try and stick to it to keep
Yeah.
that comfort level, but I don't like doing that. I don't like delivering the same book to my reader every time. I want to take
No.
them on a journey. And this fourth one is definitely a very different journey. Still has a serial killer in though, clearly. The
Oh,
one thing I can promise every time.
a serial killer is sort of,
Serial
yeah, that'll be interesting in your cozy crime. I mean, you
Oh no,
can
that
still
one's
have
not.
it.
Well, maybe. I get away with it.
I was thinking about like some of the Agatha Christie's. I mean, they generally have, they're not a serial killer as in, but they can do several murders.
Killer. Yeah. I
So
think that the kind of definition of a serial killer is killing people to a specific MO, but even that I think can be a little bit dodgy because you'll get killers like Fred West or that just kill different people in different ways, because they're impulsive and they just do it. So even
yeah,
a little bit kind of risky, but with a lot of the Agatha Christie's, they were killing for a reason, though, weren't they? They
yeah,
had a kind of
generally like
real
the
motive.
money, love, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, not just gratuitous, I'm
yeah,
just
they
gonna
were
go out
killing
and kill
for the kill.
someone.
I guess that's how you can say it. Serial killers kill for the kill.
Yeah, yeah, not for the family jewels or house or
Although bonus,
or
I guess, if you get that too.
yeah, well, yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, so that you've got a lot going on. You've got a lot
Mhm.
you're writing, and you said about your writing circle, your writing
Mm.
group. Do you write full time now? Is that your sort of day job?
Yeah, I've been doing that for about 2 years now. I mean,
Yeah,
I take on other projects as well, so this isn't just the only thing that I do. But it's intriguing. I was saying to someone the other day how it's certainly not the glamorous lifestyle that everybody thinks, because everyone, the minute
no,
they you're a full time writer, they're like, "Oh, you're off having lunch, are we?" And it's like, that's not really how it works, And it does feel like because you're self employed, I find it very difficult to take a day off.
yeah,
Whereas when I was in the office, I was 5 o'clock, I was done. Weekends I had to myself. Whereas now I don't have anything like that. I'm sometimes working till midnight because I want to get something finished, or I'm
yeah.
working all through the weekend to try and to finish off that extra chapter or the edits that I need to do. So it can be very difficult. And every time I take a day off, it feels quite guilty that I should be finishing
Yeah.
the character story.
Well, I guess when you're working for somebody else, you're sort of you have got those boundaries, haven't you? Of like,
Mhm.
well, I'm paid between X and Y, and like I have my weekends. Some people have their weekends, some people don't. But I guess when it's your set, I imagine it is quite a pressure, really, and also I imagine it can also be quite isolating in some ways because you don't have that sort of going to the office. I know even like when we were talking earlier because I spoke to you in COVID and remember how
Mm,
isolating that was when we weren't going into the office, but you're there every day, aren't you? Working on your
yeah.
own sort of thing. So I don't think it is, I don't think anybody who is a writer thinks it's glamorous at all.
No, and like you said, I mean, mental health is the theme of this book. But
Yeah.
it's, for a writer, it's actually quite important, because you're not working for a company, so you've not got someone looking after your mental health, or if you're
No.
stressed, you don't have anyone really to talk to, so you have to kind of sit in and kind of speak yourself out of it yourself. And
Yeah.
there's so many things that a writer has to deal with. I mean, we've got everything from procrastination through to imposter syndrome to
Yeah.
rejection from publishers and bad reviews and critical stuff. It keeps on coming, but you haven't got anyone to really kind of back you up, apart from, to be honest, my agent is very good like that. So I've often rang her in tears going, oh my god, you said this review.
Is it, I mean, from a sort of review point of view, is it hard? I imagine I would be dreadful. I don't think I could read them because I would take it really personally. Is it something that you learn to deal with, or is it personal when it happens?
I think it depends on the author, but
Yeah.
for me, I can only speak from my kind of point of view. I know that it's human nature to kind of home in on the bad and forget all the good, and
Yeah.
that's just how we do it. And I know that I'm very much like that. When Little Bones came out on NetGalley, literally the first review that came out was awful, absolutely. And I
Oh,
remember it
no.
word for word as well. I'm not going to repeat
Oh,
it. I was just like, oh my god, and
no. No.
sick. I was like, oh my god, what have I done? Like I've let everyone down. But then it got like hundreds and hundreds of 5-star reviews. But it's that
Yeah.
one that stuck with me, and it's a shame, because obviously we want reviews as authors,
Mhm.
but all we'd ask is really that readers be kind. And think, this is their baby. This is my baby. I spent ages on this, and it's got my blood
Exactly, yeah.
in it.
I would
And
never yeah, I'd never write a bad review because I mean, I do reviews and I just always think it doesn't matter whether I don't like it, or I think there's something for everybody in a book anyway, and I might love it, you might hate it. So I'm never going to say that. So I only do positive reviews, and I know some people are against that, but I would
mm,
rather not give a review if I'm not going to give a positive one, because I just think that there's no need.
well, we have a rule in the writers group which works for us, which is basically you can't criticize someone's work unless you have a reason why you don't like it and a solution to fix it. And
Yeah.
that keeps it constructive
Yeah.
then. So I don't mind that. So if you didn't like it, that's fine. But tell me why you didn't like it and tell me how to fix it. Because then I can learn how
Yeah.
to do better later on. Don't just
Yeah.
say like this, because that doesn't help
Wait,
me.
you see the ones for like people have put on like 1 star on Amazon because it didn't arrive on time or the cover was,
Yeah.
and you're just
You
like,
just
no, that's not what it's
I know.
for.
I think it can be very confusing, can't it? Because they're putting the Amazon and the author together, which is not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't mind anyone being honest. I'd rather get a review than not get a review, because
Yeah.
reviews, especially on Amazon, are so important to make sure that our book is visible to the public
Yeah.
and getting bought and getting downloaded. But I would just ask them to kind of think about what they're saying and think about something that
Yeah.
they had to spend a lot of time on, and how they'd feel if someone told them the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think most people, there's not many people in the world that would be okay about someone being just really pointedly rude about their book or their work or something they'd written. I don't think anybody would be okay with that. So
No,
yeah.
but like I said, everyone's got their own opinion. I'd rather get a review than not get a review. But
Yeah.
um and unfortunately they are few and far between. So the majority of readers are absolutely amazing, and they tell you what they like, and they can
Yeah.
help you, and if they didn't like it that much, as long as they say why they didn't like it, then
Yeah,
at least
definitely.
something I can work
Yeah.
with going forward. But it's those that are just kind of mean for the sake of being mean.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not cool, is it? Who's talking of authors, so who's your favorite author? Do you have a favorite author?
Oh, that's like saying who's your favorite child.
Yeah.
I'd say, and I've said this before, I'm really good friends with the author Jane Isaac,
Yeah.
who's also part of the group, and I love her work, and she's been a bit of a mentor to me. She's absolutely amazing, so I would always recommend her books.
And read anything recently that you've really enjoyed, that you could recommend?
Yeah, I actually read The Final Party by A. Chowdhury
Oh,
recently.
that's so good.
Isn't it? Isn't
Yeah.
it? Very twisted, which I
Yeah.
loved. Very and it kept me going, which is quite hard for me sometimes, because I'm reading my own stuff so many times. It can be quite
Yeah.
difficult to shut off and read someone else's work, but that actually kept my attention. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no, I really loved it. It was one of my top 10 actually on here. We do like a top 10 of the year, and it was one of mine. I really loved it. I just thought it was
Yeah.
really clever, the different characters, and the way that you sort of swap from the past to the present. I thought it was
Yeah,
great.
she
Yeah,
plays timelines really well, but it's quite it's difficult to talk about and then not let anything out the
it
bag.
is. Yeah.
So it's quite hard.
Yeah, no, definitely. If you haven't read it, it was I can't remember what number it was in my top 10, but it was like it was one of
Mhm.
my top 10 of last year, because I just thought it was so clever, the way that there was so, a lot of characters as well. I was really in awe of the depths that she went into with the characters as well.
Yeah, that's like a murder board in itself that I think she
Yeah.
probably had
Yeah.
her study
Yeah.
keeping track. Um, and also, I mean, a non-fiction book, if I'm allowed to mention one, I
Yeah, of
read
course.
Fear by Gavin DeBeck, which was I would teach in schools because it was just
Really.
so not only so interesting but really could save your life. It's talking about how predators, like as in human predators, will approach you and how to listen to your gut when that's happening, because especially women are taught to be polite
Yeah.
and think over these things and think, oh, he's not actually meaning that, or to fall for certain tricks. And the whole thing, it goes through everything from kind of stalkers to killers to sexual predators and how they will approach you and what's going on. It gives examples, and it was just thoroughly interesting. Like I said, I think it should be taught in school.
Yeah.
It should be everyone's kind of defense manual.
Because you mentioned about that you sort of like the true crime, and you sort of like that, and does that sort of feature in your books generally? It does sort of in this one, yeah, to a certain extent. And is that something that you sort of like to bring across?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, true crime podcasts are what inspired Little Bones to begin with, but with
Yeah.
this, very much the kind of armchair detectives that thought they think they know what they're doing, and they're pointing their finger at people, and they're doing stuff, and it's that kind of ethos as to, are these guys on the right path, or are they on the wrong path, or are they good guys or are they
Yeah.
bad? And having that question put upon them as well, because just because someone has access to the internet, that doesn't make them a detective, or does it?
No.
We don't know.
No. No, no, definitely. Oh, it's been so good to talk to you, Nikki. I've really, really enjoyed it. Did you want to just give us a little bit of a sort of a finale about the book? Why should we? I've read it. It's really great. So why should everybody else read it?
Well, I think everyone else should read it because it's red, first of all, which is my
It
favorite
is
color.
red. It's very striking, actually. When I was
Very
describing it, I was describing it on the group, and I was saying it had the red background with I was saying to my husband, what are these things called? 5-bar gates.
tallies. Well, I am. My mum always gets literally the first author copy out of the box, and when I
Yeah.
gave it to my mum, she was like, "Oh, this one's smudged. Can I get a different one?" But yeah, people should read it because, especially if they like a bit of a dark psychological thriller, they want something to keep them up at night, but also something to think about as well. If that's what they
Yeah.
choose, then definitely The 13th Girl is for you.
It definitely is. It's definitely, and I actually now, after talking to you, it's made me think about it even more. So
Oh,
hopefully, if you watch this, then you'll want to go out and read the book. I'll put it on the chat later. So if anybody wants to have a look at where you can get it, because it's available in paperback and it's also available in
audio.
ebook, audio
And
book. That's it. Annie
yeah, I'm
Annie.
I'm part of the UK crime book group. So if anyone wants to talk
Yeah,
about it,
yeah, that's great.
I
Well,
love
thank you
talking.
for thank you for joining us. Good luck with the book. And yeah, we'd love to, when if you want to come on and chat about your cozy crime in future, or the next thriller, which sounds amazing, we'd love to have you.
Oh, thank you ever so much for having me today, though. This was
That's
great.
okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Take care.
everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.